Welcome, everyone, and thank you for having us. Today, the title is about how marketers can effectively leverage machine translation and AI. Let me quickly introduce myself. My name is Jonas. I'm your host today and the moderator. So my team and I are basically making sure that prospects and clients are getting the most out of Phrase. Today, together with me, there are my dear colleague, Tobias Scherf, and I'm happily handing over the microphone to Tobias to introduce himself.
Thank you, Jonas. Yes, I'm Tobias Scherf, Director of Solutions at Phrase, and have been with Phrase for over 3 years now. And I've enjoyed working in the localization industry in various capacities for the last nearly 23 years here, including in the fields of machine translation, enterprise settings, as well as enterprise localization workflows and quality management. And I'll hand off to Ratibor.
Hello, everybody. I'm Ratibor. I'm co-founder of agency Actum Digital. We founded Actum 27, even more years ago. And since then, we have been gaining our experience from working on international web projects, for large corporations, and we are currently over 300 people. So that's me. And your turn, Philip.
Hello, everybody. My name is Philip Katz. This is my 2nd year with Actum Digital, and I manage a division which provides our clients with support on their content operations and execution of email campaigns. I'm glad to be here with you today again.
Thank you for being with us. And Tobias, would you mind sharing what Phrase is all about?
Yes, absolutely. So Phrase is a leading translation technology provider supporting localization needs for some of the most well-known brands across various verticals. And our strengths related to today's discussion, at least, include innovation and thought leadership around machine translation automation, including the use of AI technologies to enhance that. And with that, I'll pass to Ratibor.
Thanks a lot. Introducing Actum. Actum Digital is agency which is active on DACH and US and Benelux market. We support our clients with specific e-commerce, web development, content solutions, and operations. And we currently cover a whole digital stack. And we operate, our clients comes mainly from manufacturing, finance, and retail. And we are partnering with Phrase for 2nd, maybe 3rd year now. So that's about us. Back to you, Yanis.
Perfect. Thanks both. And again, we have decades of experience here. So the approach for today is to have a panel discussion about various questions. We do have a Slido open at the end of the webinar. So please participate, collect your questions. We are happy to dig into these questions at the end in our Q&A session. Philip, how can you utilize and syndicate existing content to control costs?
Well, if you plan to expand your brand reach and if you plan to go into new markets, obviously reusing existing content is very cost-effective solution. But if you want to be successful at that, there are for sure some best practices that you should follow, and we will be happy to share some of those with you today. First of all, if you want to utilize and syndicate your content, you should be well aware of what you have at hand and what you don't have. So some kind of initial assessment is a very good thing to start with, and that should give you an idea what kind of existing content you have and what can be used, what kind of content might need some rewriting, and what kind of content of yours that is already existing will be discarded. It's always good to run some keyword analysis and analyze their search volumes, because that can enable you to find any potential content gaps and bring some ideas for additional content creation. And such analysis will also give you any idea of what kind of low risk and high risk content you have at hand, which kind of content might be used across multiple channels or multiple platforms. And you can also get an overview of any user-generated content, like testimonials or maybe customer reviews that you can use across multiple markets when going global. So ideal result of such initial assessment should be some kind of a comprehensive content matrix for all content that you can use, rewrite, translate, and expand to all the markets you're planning to enter.
Actually, I really agree with you, Philip, that the preparation phase is important, because if I can give an example of a project of Upnor, this was a project which we were working on for 10 months, and the costs were around several thousand, 100,000 euros. And from these costs, over the 36% of the budget was allocated on the work with the content. And the reason why such a high number was spent on the content was that there were not preparation tools and even knowledge about the content, what kind of content will be used, localized, reused, or, as you mentioned, discarded. So I absolutely agree that that preparation is the point. And speaking about the content preparation, it's good to know that it's not only about text content, but graphical content as well. And here there are multiple tools which can help you to optimize some type of work. For example, pictures with some descriptions inside of the pictures can be translated and recreated automatically or semi-automatically, and it's a great help to all the editors. So these are the possibilities how to leverage and utilize the content over many countries or languages.
Very fair point.
Yeah.
Tobias, please go ahead.
I was just going to jump in. So from strictly from a translation perspective, initially here, I would say, if you have existing translations, whether they've maybe already been vetted by human beings, so by linguists, but you don't have assets created what we would consider translation memory, so bilingual data, those can be formed from monolingual content as well. So you could generate what we call translation memories from monolingual data, just to not lose your leverage down the road and basically be able to reuse that content, right? Specifically, if you trust the quality already. That kind of corpus data can also be used if you're ready for, let's say, generating custom trained MT models. So if you're even beyond the point of generic models and want to actually delve right into custom trained models, so you can do that as well. The other parts, of course, maybe you've already worked as Radibor indicated, sort of and Philip also indicated, sort of the brand consistency around using keywords and maybe running, scans on how well your keywords perform. Maybe you've already set those in cement ultimately for your languages as well, your various locales, and having those isolated or identified and then incorporated into terminology database and or glossary data is key, right? So you can also consistently make sure that whether you use an MT strategy, that MT strategy can utilize your keywords as well, just to improve your content, right? And your brand consistency and things like that. And then, going over to, from a technology perspective, of course, CMS solutions and many CMS solutions on the market would offer things like concepts such as snippets and fragments, where you really have the tooling available to you to reuse content there as well, right? So from an authoring perspective, and that lends itself to consistency, of course, in the source content, but also the ability to leverage translated content later on.
All right, Tobias, which is a great segue. You mentioned it already, strategy. So how can you build a localization strategy around your tech stack? Philip?
Well, I mean, every company has many technology systems in place. And in order to be able to build a localization strategy around that tech stack, you need to understand how it fits the process and how it fits your intentions. So again, once again, some kind of assessment is a good thing to start with, to see where you can leverage your technology, and perhaps even some automation to streamline the localization process. And you might find out that you will be adding, some more tech to your environment. And, if that happens, and it happens quite often, especially on larger projects, then it's essential to, get all the proper training for all the people involved.
Sorry.
What do you think?
Exactly. Exactly. I mute myself by coincidence. Sorry. Yeah, you are absolutely right. Speaking about strategy, there are, from my perspective and my experience, there are three main areas to focus. One area is the technology itself. How do your technology stack looks like? And it's about the decisions about technology stack are driven by costs, of course, but as well driven by quality of the output you want to achieve, because there is a cost and quality ratio. So if you are international large corporation and you think about your tech stack, and you believe that your tech stack is simple and transparent, it's and easy to work with, so get back to drawing table again, because it's not. It's not simply, there is not any large company with simple and easy tech stack. So it always can be a little bit simpler to use. Second part of your strategy is about the quality of content, the quantity of the content you want to produce. And this is quite a tricky part, because people inside of your company will tell you other stories than people outside of your company. So regarding the usage of the content and need of the content, don't ask people inside, ask your clients, ask your consumers of the content, because that should be the driver of your decision about quantity and quality. And third part of your strategy is, on the other hand, dependent on internal people. So ask them how difficult their work is, how complex and complicated are their tasks, how the workflow is complex. So if you have a simple technology, you should have a strict and well-described workflows, and it all should lead to the quality and quantity of the content you need for users. So that's are the initial cornerstones of the content strategy. Back to you, Tobias, if you want to follow on automation stuff.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so I mean, there's multiple thoughts. Like if you're starting small, let's say, then maybe you should think big down the road. Initially you might do things very manually, but down the road you'll definitely want to automate, specifically if your amount of content grows, right? It's going to become overwhelming and essentially will bottleneck you if you can't automate around your tech stack. With that, of course, like Philip mentioned, if you think it's simple, it's probably not, and you should rethink that. Often I want to say it's easiest if you can keep the relevant players in their sort of technologies, right? So don't want to necessarily force the content author into a localization tool, and vice versa, as much as you can avoid that, right? So as much as you can automate handoffs and or provide visibility in either tool to sort of the status when there's interoperability, that kind of makes a big difference down the road also, right? Because a lot of people really don't want to play in multiple tools, right? The fewer they have to touch, the better in the end. But again, that plays to the sort of need and concept of automation and the ability to integrate, right, the tools, or whether there is integration options. So if you're starting small today, think about, are there things like connectors, plugins, APIs that you can leverage down the road, and how easy would that be to do that? And maybe also think about the technologies you use and where they play sort of in the market, what role they play, right? Are they sort of a thought leader in the market, or are they kind of like, just kind of hanging on in a way?
Yeah, those are great points, Tobias. Thank you. And maybe I would add one more thing. And if you're introducing some kind of strategy and there are like new processes, you should definitely, keep your eye on it and monitor and optimize, the strategy once it is in place, especially if it's new to the members of your team.
That's absolutely right, because the adoption cost of the strategy of the tools are significant, because people are changing, technologies are changing. So that's another driver of your costs, and it's how quickly your team is able to grab new tools and utilize them effectively and quickly. So it's very important to include adoption time and costs into your calculations. Good point.
Yeah, and very good segue, Ratibor. So by coincidence, our next slide is all about the costs and AI. And of course, a lot of prospects and clients always ask, so what's kind of the effectively utilization of machine translation and AI, and how can I cut my costs? Tobias, do you want to start?
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, with the use of machine translation, you can of course start, if you wanted to, with generic engines. And as you can see here on the slide, there's a number of them that probably look very familiar. You may have used or maybe have thought of using. So it could be like providers such as Amazon, Microsoft. You'll see Tencent here, which is more geared towards Asian languages. Same with Rosetta. You have DeepL, and then Google, right, in the mix. There may be more. The reason these are specifically outlined is that they're in our platform is also some level of automation and AI around these. But when it comes to generic, maybe also the discussion around maybe what's your content type, right? And how am I going to translate? What am I going to translate? That matters. And you'll maybe find that some of the generic engines don't always play well for given language pairs, and or maybe aren't the strongest when it comes to certain content types, right? So they're not all equal across the board. And then you may consider sort of the need for post editing, right? And whether you use raw machine translation just as it is from the output, depending on what your content need is. So whether you're translating marketing related content such as web content, maybe email messaging and things like that, or you're just translating something like a knowledge base article where maybe accuracy is important, but the flow and the style of the translation matters a lot less, right? So those are considerations, and you'll probably think about, okay, is it something I should post edit, right? Do I need post editing to improve the machine translation quality output for a given content, or can I just live with raw MT? But ultimately, a lot of that you still won't know exactly how good it is, right? From an MT perspective, so you'll have to kind of think of it from a perspective of quality and what you're actually getting out of the raw MT content. And that's something where you still need to some degree human beings involved, generally speaking. Or you can, of course, incorporate AI technologies that will provide you with the ability to move to some AI concepts that allow you to understand quality output and or make the best choice around machine translation. So speaking about that, Yanis, you kind of forwarded to the auto select region. This is one of our AI platforms, right? And AI in this case provides you with the ability to select or make the best selection of the machine translation given the certain content type. So when analyzed, 70% of translation projects could be using a better MT engine, right? So meaning if you have a strict strategy of always using the same, likely 70% of the time you're not using the most optimal MT engine. MT Auto Select sort of does this for you, right? So by selecting multiple options that you've seen on the previous screen in a profile, you're allowing this AI technology to, one, analyze your content for its content domain, where you can see, okay, is it business, is it legal finance, is it travel, hospitality, entertainment, or other different domains? And based on that information and the language pair that you're translating into, the AI can then make the optimal selection of an MT provider in your profile. Then you don't have to worry about that, right? So you actually are in the position where you're using the most optimal MT at that point, right?
Yeah, Tobias, I can only confirm from the content perspective. Obviously, there are many tools for translation on the market, but they typically have like their basic stuff and then premium, and they for sure do not work same against different types of content and against different language pairs. And it might be very frustrating. It is very frustrating to, pay all the premium tools and then test and learn by mistake which performs best against this type of content and this language pair. So some feature like auto select could be very valuable. And at the same time, making differences between, let's say, low risk content like social media or user generated content, and then high risk content, like, for example, some technical documentation or some legal stuff, is very crucial from the post-editing perspective too, because with the first one, you can easily go with raw MT. And if you have a good tool or good choice of tools, then it's typically good enough. And while with the legal stuff, you need to really be cautious how you translate it, and it definitely needs post-editing.
Absolutely. Sorry. If I may give an example of your project, we were working for manufacturer of internal lamps and lightnings, large retailer and manufacturer from Germany. And there was a project where approximately 200 of product, let's say, pages needed to be localized. And original idea was to, by client, was to use human translators. And we, at the end, decided to go with some automation and machine translations. And there was a tremendous difference in costs and speed of the translation. Of course, regarding the speed, it's obvious. Original plan was several weeks, and machine translation happened in seconds. And regarding the costs, original costs were in tens of thousands of euros, and machine translation was just around several thousand euros, so 10 times less. So every project is different, of course, but just imagine that this is kind of, let's say, normal project with easy content to localize. So you can expect even better results than this.
And moving on with better
Yeah.
results, Tobias, yes, please, the microphone is yours. I think the next slide is all about machine translation glossaries. Can you give a little bit of insights about that as well?
Yes. So, I mean, going back maybe to the discussion leading into today's session, right? Is we talked a little bit about keywords and optimization, but terminology, if you will, as a whole, right? And if you don't use MT glossaries today, or your terminology content in an MT setting, you're really kind of making your linguists review and correct the same things over and over again, right? And you're actually setting yourselves up also for risk and brand inconsistencies, and the things that we discussed earlier. But also maybe jeopardizing your sort of search results, right, as well, right? So from a keyword optimization perspective, you've gone through the trouble of making sure you have the right keywords, so making sure that they're actually inserted correctly, and not having to have the linguists consistently change them. It's probably a good idea. It's pretty accessible to do this today, right? So we can see like a list of different MT providers, specifically generic ones, that give you that option. When you do custom trained models, this is a little bit, can be a little bit less of a problem if you're already training your content specific with your keywords, right? But it's always a good idea to incorporate MT glossaries in either case. Some systems provide some additional capabilities around MT glossaries versus just a simple replacement, right? And those are NextMT from Phrase and DeepL, right? They give you some morphologically correct insertion of content. So you're considering gender and or plurals in the context of the translation. All right. Yeah, and then kind of wrapping up with Phrase Translate on this one. Phrase Translate, generally speaking, as a whole, which gives you sort of the AI capabilities around, the auto select, to MT quality estimation, so giving you an idea of what the quality is coming out of raw MT to begin with, to be able to assess whether content is maybe MT ready for post editing, right? Or whether it's maybe even a bad idea to use machine translation on that content in the first place. Or to maybe even identify specifically what content do we not have to post edit because the quality is sufficient for my use case based on the MTQE scoring, and to give also maybe some context around light post editing if I want to just very specifically target some of the more problematic areas of the machine translated output, right? This is all part of Phrase Translate, and then it's in addition to that, of course, the MT glossary management as well. So there's a nice package of AI capabilities that otherwise people tend to do manually, very manually, right? And spend a lot of resources on periodically improving, trying to improve or course correct sort of their strategy in the MT setting.
Yeah, and I think, Tobias, this is far more important if you're considering some longer term strategy, because I mean, if you're running like a one-off project, it might not be as crucial. But if you're, looking for longer term results, then obviously any, AI learning and usage of artificial intelligence is a great asset and saves a lot of time and hence obviously money.
Yeah, exactly.
So we were talking about time, money, and quality. So one question we discussed when preparing to the webinar for today was about brand consistency. Ratibor, you had a great point. Would you mind elaborate to the audience?
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. Sorry. This one is a little bit tricky one, because first of all, you need to understand what is the source of problems with brand consistency. And obviously the problem are people, right? Your people or our people, inside people. And specifically when we are talking about some industries like manufacturing and so on, people don't have a knowledge how to work in long term to achieve the consistent brand, united language, and so on. So that's one problem. Simply lack of experience. And of course, the second characteristic which influence this is number of people from many countries, many departments who participate in creation of the content. So, question is how you can help to these people. So, and basic answer is let's help them with preparation of professional tools like style guides, like processes, templates, brief templates, and so on. And this is a great answer, but people need to learn how to work with this. And there is another possibility where to use machine not translation, but machine intelligence. And you can train the people not to create consistent text, but you can train them how to use AI for creating consistent texts, consistent briefs, and so on. So there are many tools for enhancement of language, quality of language. You can brief AI on a style or topic and get consistent insights for your briefs or either final texts. So that's where you can leverage machines to improve work of your people.
Perfect, Ratibor. Looking at our time, I would love to proceed. And I know that Tobias, in terms of AI and technology, we were talking about NextMT. Maybe you can give us like a minute or so, quick overview.
Yeah, sure. NextMT is ultimately, if you will, it's listed currently in our generic engines group, but would like to say that the NextMT is really kind of sets itself apart from a typical generic MT engine. It's sort of a step up, if you will, and almost towards the realm of custom MT. Because it uses your existing translation memory. So if you have bilingual data, translation memories in the platform, it's actually able to leverage that content. And whenever you have fuzzy matches, it can actually take and improve those fuzzy matches with the missing content, right? Using MT where it's really needed and reusing the content you've already developed and you trust from your translation memory. And it does that while also incorporating, like I mentioned before, MT glossaries in using morphologically correct insertions of your terminology, right? So whether that be keywords for marketing, right, making sure your branding is consistent, but doing that based on existing data, right? Not too much leaning on MT when it's not necessary. And of course, it can do just raw machine translation output when you don't have any TM. Matches, but it will actually excel and provide super good output, of course, when you can combine it with TM data. And as it stands, it's the first of its kind in the market.
Perfect. Thanks, Tobias. And roadblockers and pitfalls. Again, we did a webinar where we discussed that in depth. So to the panel, your top roadblock, Ratibor.
From my perspective, top roadblock is alignment between the teams. It's alignment on expectations of the project. So we had a project for a large automotive manufacturer in Germany, and the project was stopped after 9 months of work. And the reason was simply that the team who was creating and working on the project was in complete disalignment with another team who was in use of the output of this project. So from my perspective, alignment, internal alignment about the goals and expectations, the biggest problem, biggest roadblock for this.
Misalignment and miscommunication.
Yes.
Philip, your top roadblock.
Yeah, well, Ratibor mentioned lack of communication. Mine would probably be lack of resources or sometimes lack of expertise or skill. Especially we can see this with smaller teams where there is not enough people to have deep enough expertise in all the areas that are necessary. So in such case, you need to either train them or get that expertise from outside the company. And maybe lack of quality control as well, which is again very important for the results. What do you think, Tobias? What are your top roadblocks?
Yeah, I think today it's really kind of maybe a good pointer is this lack of resources and budget, right? It's often content explodes and I don't have enough time and or people to tackle it. So really it's around automation and future vision around, again, going back sort of to the tech stack, right? Thinking big and thinking, how can I optimize this to the point where I can handle the volumes that I want to handle, maybe need to handle with the given budget I have and the given resources I have. So it's very critical, I think, to think about that. And then, of course, you also mentioned, Philip, earlier, is training, right? Around that, it's very critical. So if I have resource constraints, they also need to be optimally trained.
Yeah, and you need to budget for that training, which is a very important thing. And often companies find out that they run out of budget and they have not gone through the training.
Exactly.
Perfect. Thanks, panel. And now it is up to you. You find the Slido.com here as well as in the chat. So looking very much forward to your questions. As you've seen, a lot of topics to tackle. So here's the Slido, the hashtag MTNAI. And the panel is curious and positive to answer all your questions. So just switching to the Slido. All right, so we do have some questions. Are there further questions? Otherwise, we will talk about roadblocks and pitfalls. We received the feedback that last time that has been received quite positively, therefore. So maybe, Philip, do you have an additional roadblock for the audience?
Are you on mute, Philip?
Philip, I think you're muted.
I'm sorry. Technical limitations are sometimes a roadblock too, because obviously technology is great help, but it has its limits and sometimes you just run into it.
Perfect. And as you can see, the questions are flying in. So shall we start at the beginning? Patrick, how do you evaluate MT, machine translation quality? Tobias.
Yeah, so there's multiple ways to do that. I mean, you can go through human vetting, of course, and then you essentially calculate the edit distance and generate some scoring data around that. So it'd be typically things like TER, CHR3, maybe Comet, Meteor, some of the different MT metrics you'll employ to just get a sense of the MT quality to compare. Within our TMS solution, we also offer data access through Snowflake, where you can pull that kind of reporting, because anytime there is post-edited content, it will generate these scores for you, and you can evaluate long-term MT quality metrics.
All right, perfect. Do we want to go to the next one? I hope that has been answered. Patrick, please reach out to us if not. How do you use monolingual content to create translation memories? Who wants to go with this one?
Maybe I can take it, unless you guys want to. So monolingual content, it can be challenging. It depends on whether it's structured content, such as structured document types, XMLs, JSON files, YAML files, or something like that, where you have an easy way to align based on a key level. Once you get to unstructured content, it gets a little bit more difficult, specifically also if there's a misalignment in terms of sentence pairs, meaning you have like maybe 2 or 3 sentences in English or stored language that then correspond to more or fewer sentences on the target side, that can get quite challenging. So there's aligners that often are offered within TMS solutions that will help you through the process. Some of that may have to do some corrections on, right? So automation will do a good first stab, and then you'll have to improve. We have also some AI-based aligners in that we use in some cases where we work through some of that and try to automate it and improve sort of the outcome for a first step through technology as well.
All right, perfect. So I hope that has been answered. Again, please reach out to us at any time or just ask another question. If not, then we have Chris Franz. Do you think, what do you think is the most critical step of the process? What's the most critical step? Philip, maybe.
I think, my opinion, it's the people in the process, because anything else you can either done better or worse. But if your people are not on board and the processes are not defined and people don't follow them, you're destined to fail.
If I may add to this, I agree. But from my perspective, the most important point in the process is evaluation of the content, the decision, what to use, how to use, and where to use, because that has a really significant influence on time and costs you will need. So that's the evaluation process is the most important part of all.
Mm-hmm. All right. Anything to add? Okay. In terms of the next question, how does Phrase decide which is the best MT depending on the text to be translated? Who wants to take this one? Tobias?
Probably, yeah, that one's probably for me. So NextMT, or not NextMT, but our Phrase translate ultimately will run a domain classification. So this is an AI-based process of identifying what your content is about. And it'll use that data along with the language pair, source and content, or source and target pair, to determine which one of the MT providers you've enabled in your profile is going to be the best one. That data is something that is collected through human vetting, ongoing on real projects ultimately, right? And consistently fed into our system. And that data is usually only about 60 days old. So we always lop off the oldest data and always kind of looking at, okay, are there improvements on the MT provider side that will actually yield better translations? So maybe tomorrow Microsoft is on top. The month later, maybe Amazon does something to their MT models where they now improve their output, right? Or have retrained their content on a certain topic or similar. Right, so that's kind of how we go about it. If you'd like to know more, definitely reach out to us.
Yeah, and I can only confirm that there could be huge differences between the tools. And we're still talking about the top brands, so comparing like similar capabilities, and the differences are sometimes quite big.
All right, perfect. Thank you. Maybe the next one I can take myself. How much is NextMT? So we are not selling NextMT separately, but it is part of an add-on. Tobias just mentioned it. It's called Phrase Translate. And we are quite transparent with how we are pricing our product as well as our add-ons. So phrase.com/pricing for more information, or please reach out to us. We will happily consult and guide you through the correct plan. So how much is NextMT? Contact us or phrase.com/pricing. And then last but not least, how do you build a translation memory and keep it updated and clean? Last question for today. Who wants to go?
Yeah, okay. So maybe Philip will speak to it a bit, but translation memory is ultimately built within typically a TMS or a CAT tool, right? So depending on what level you're ready for, a TMS solution ultimately will give you the capabilities of creating translation memories in which you can then store the translated content you've created as part of your workflow. Once you've established that, like you mentioned, how do we keep it updated and clean? It really kind of relates around strategy and content strategy and how your localization flow works. If you allow content manipulation after the translation is completed, let's say directly in a CMS or the like, then you have to think about, okay, how does that tie in with the TMS, and whether the CMS and the TMS can actually interoperate in a way where the CMS can keep the content in the TMS updated, meaning you can automatically update the translation memory from your target content. In some cases, that's possible because we have functionalities called update target, which allows you to automatically push changes back to the TMS. It's not always possible, not always with every single CMS provider, right? Because there are technical limitations sometimes due to the way we can pinpoint content back to a certain TM entry, and or how the integration can work based on the third-party APIs. The other option, of course, is that you sort of take a TMS-centric approach, which is, I'll update the content in the TMS and then push it back to, let's say, my integration, the CMS, to update it there.
Yeah. Please, Philip, please go ahead.
Well, I didn't want to add to how you build a translation memory. I wanted to add how you hold on to your translation memory, and that's a huge topic we've had with several of our clients. Because if you invest in building a translation memory, and it obviously pays off from long-term perspective, it is important to know that you're able to hold on to it and maybe even translate it to transfer it if you want to start using some other system or some other provider. So that's a huge topic from my perspective, content.
Perfect, Philip. And that would be probably the segue to our next webinar, if that is an interesting topic. For all the audience and attendees, thank you so much for attending. And of course, to the panel, Tobias, Philip, Ratibor, thanks for sharing. We probably could keep on talking a long while. So to all of you, you will receive an email tomorrow with the recording. Please reach out to us if one of the topics you heard today is interesting to you, so that you might want a deep dive with this panel. We are happy to provide that. Again, thank you all for participating. Thanks all, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very
it's
much,
great to be
guys.
here with you. Bye.
Have a nice day.